Okay, we're good to go.
All right. Thank you very much, Barbara. My name is Chip Osborne. I'm the president of Osborne Organics and a board of directors, board member of Beyond Pesticides, and I will be your moderator for this session. We're very excited about this. You know, Jay Feldman, our executive director, ever the master at putting together groups of people to get a specific topic or information out there. It's just unbelievable the way he does things and puts it together, and this is no exception. We have a couple of different stories here that we're going to tell, actually three, from the municipal sector in Montgomery County in Maryland, and looking at things from a perspective there, University of California, Berkeley, and a transition that is underway there, and then the city of Dover in New Hampshire and what happened there. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk for maybe a half an hour. I'm going to introduce the different speakers. They'll each get 5 or 6 minutes to tell you a little bit about who they are and give a high-level overview of what they are doing. They have previously recorded information, and hopefully you've gotten to see that. We have Theron Klos and Juan Casanova. Theron is the manager of landscape services at the University of California Berkeley. Juan is the landscape supervisor at UC Berkeley. Mary Travaglini, the Department of Environmental Protection, Montgomery County, Maryland, who oversees the Organic Lawn and Landscape Program. Dennis Shanahan, City Councilor, City of Dover, New Hampshire. John Storr, Community Services Director, City of Dover, New Hampshire. And Pam Newcombe, Principal and owner of PJC Organic, and the owner of the Pro Healthy Turf brand of organic fertilizer, who is representing the practitioner and the service provider end of organic land care. So we're going to talk about how things started with advocates. The Dover story is great. A woman, Diana Carbonone, Non-Toxic Dover, was, I won't say relentless, but she was right on this issue from the beginning. And it ended up that all parks now and programs are organic. In UC Berkeley, Mackenzie Feldman and Bridget Gustafson, and they have done herbicide-free campus and worked with Theron and but gave him support. So the advocacy community is support. So in those cities where we have advocates that help with this issue, informing the public and bringing awareness to the issue, and we really have these two stories. I'd like to start with Mary. So we have Mary Travaglini from the DEP in Montgomery County, Maryland. Mary, if you'd tell us a little bit about your perspective in all of this.
Sure, thanks, Chip. Just to give you a little bit of background, Montgomery County, Maryland is the largest county in Maryland, and it's a very large county in terms of the United States as well, in terms of population and density. We have over 1 million residents in Montgomery County, a very large population, a very large area. And we happen to be in Maryland, which is one of the states that the legislative body has allowed us to do what's called preempt state law, which means that if there's a state law covering, let's say, smoking in restaurants, if smoking was allowed in restaurants, but in Montgomery County, we wanted to say no smoking in restaurants, we have preemption ability to do certain things. So we're allowed to preempt law in Montgomery County when it comes to the pesticide laws. The state itself has some very good pesticide laws to protect our people, our residents, wildlife, and the bay, but they mostly mimic what federal law is. They don't really go above and beyond anything that's already out there in terms of federal law. They do have a state chemist that allows licensing of pesticides in the state, but again, for the most part, if it's allowed by the feds, it's usually allowed in Maryland. And a number of years ago, there was groups of advocates in the county that started asking about more pesticide protections for the county and its people and environment. And so the law rapidly changed. We always had a pesticide law, but it was very minimal in that it covered retail space and dealt with storage and spillage and transport, but didn't do any additional regulations on terms of what could be used and where those products could be used. So in 2015, a law was passed that restricted the use of synthetic chemicals for primarily cosmetic purposes for lawns, playgrounds, mulch recreation areas, and the grounds of private child care facilities. We already have some laws that protect all of our public schools. We have some separate laws that pertain to parks. But when it came to every other lawn in the county, there was no additional restrictions until 2015. In 2015, it immediately took place on any county-owned property, but it was supposed to take effect on private property in 2018. We were challenged in the courts by a variety of industry folks, private folks, and trade groups. They tried to challenge that we were not allowed to preempt law. We had to go through years of legal challenges with that. It still remained in effect on county property during that time period, but when it was supposed to take effect in 2018, we would have had about 2.5 years for education and transition of the public. But since it was stuck in the courts, we were challenged in that we didn't have the resources and we didn't really know what to tell people. We didn't know to tell them, be ready, in 2 years, this is going to change. By the time it got through the courts, it was 2019, and it was in place right away because of the way the law was written. So since then, we've spent most of our energy and resources educating the folks in the county, as well as the applicators and companies in the county, about the law and where it applies. As I mentioned, it's a ban on synthetic products for use for common pests, which means really it's the other way around. We allow organic products. If it's allowed under USDA organic standards, it is allowed on lawns, playgrounds, private child care facilities, and mulch recreation areas. If it's not allowed under USDA standards, it's not allowed on those lawns. So lawns, are significant. They cover about 26% of the county is in turf grass, which mirrors a lot of mixed areas throughout the country in terms of the amount of turf grass that's out there. There are some exemptions when it comes to things like golf courses, ag fields, and so on, but it does have a very large impact, and it is a big change for folks. So we spend a lot of time working with people on what organic lawn care is. We try to educate people about how to take care of their lawns without chemicals whatsoever. We don't endorse or recommend actually any pesticide use whatsoever in lawns. We give people all the other tools besides pesticides, including not giving recommendations on organic pesticides, but folks still have access to them and can use them. One of our biggest challenges is in the retail space, because the products can still be sold because they can be used in other areas. They can be used in crack and crevice control. They can be used in garden beds. So people will go out there and question, well, if I can just buy it on a shelf, I should, that means I could use it, right? So there is some signage that's required in the retail space, but it is one of our bigger challenges when it comes to educating the public about what can be done. We do, sort of take people back to a time that nobody on this call is a part of. When I give a presentation, I might ask for a show of hands how many people were doing lawn care before World War II. And of course, we all know none of the hands go up. But before World War II, we were doing lawn care without the use of these synthetic products. In fact, we were doing it without the use of pretty much any pesticide in general. So we know it can be done. It's just that we've had these shortcuts for many years. People have become very reliant on it in terms of what amount of time they have in their schedule. Their soils might be quite dead. Their soils might be also damaged from pesticide use. So we focus on soil fertility and all these other things you can do, but understand that a lot of people might have transitions. Now, the law has been in effect for approximately, since June of 2019 is when it started to come into effect. So we're really looking at 2 years now. And to date, while we haven't been able to directly survey the pesticide applicators and the turf companies, to date, we are not getting a lot of complaints from folks about, especially from professionals, about how things are going. We haven't had folks saying, hey, we lost all of our business, we're out of the county, we can't work here anymore, et cetera. I think they would still like to be able to go back to an old way of being, but most of them had an organic regimen beforehand. and are able to provide that. So after 2 seasons, we have not had a lot of feedback on the negative side of things. We do get a fair number of complaints here and there from people who want to be able to use these products on their own. Maybe they didn't have a lawn care company and they were using it before. We do recognize that there's a lot of people that still may not know that exists and are using the incorrect products. And then of course, as what happens with any environmental laws, we have folks who skirt those laws. But over time, we're seeing more transition. We're really pleased with the rollout so far of how it's been going. And we're there as a resource for other places that are looking to enact similar laws. We recognize that a lot of states cannot preempt state law, but then the state law might be rather minimum, where it's a question of trying and who's out there. But having advocates have been really good for the county in terms of having folks that support this and support the work, and having the populace is getting more and more educated about soil fertility and the importance of having healthy lawns without the use of pesticides. And I'll stop there for you, Chip.
Great, thank you very much. That's excellent. So that really talks about that, and a lot of that in Montgomery County was advocacy driven back in the very beginning of it. We have Theron Klos with us from UC Berkeley, and he's going to tell you a little bit of the high level on what happened there. And Mary mentioned it: soils, healthy soils, unhealthy soils. It really is about the soil. If you listen to Jeff Moyer speak in the introduction of this conference, that's really what it's all about for us in land care. Systemic change and looking at a focus on soils and not the plant. Theron, are you there? Want to do 5 minutes for us?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chip. I just want to give kudos to Mary for all her efforts and going organic for all the lawns, both public and private in our county. I think it's amazing and such a daunting challenge. I can't imagine all the hurdles and obstacles that she has faced. What an accomplishment. Way to go, Mary. Keep up the good work. Here at UC Berkeley, it was a bit serendipitous and how we went organic in our 2 most iconic lawns, both memorial and faculty glade on campus. It has been a long-range goal, but how to reach that goal right while maintaining landscapes on campus was very daunting. It was a matter of how to juggle the impossible and then add organic management into it. So back in March of 2017, I attended a seminar from that Susan Jun Fish from Parents for a Safer Environment had invited me to via an email. Little did I know that she was such a force of nature. She was incredible. Her drive, her motivation, her energy was contagious. So at that seminar, I met you, Chip, and Susan got a $10,000 grant for UC Berkeley to be in the pilot program for organic lawn management. And then 15 months later, in July of 2018, Juan, myself, Chip, were walking the 2 glades to start this wonderful program, but yet very challenging program. So even though we were totally aligned within our organization in going organic, that included myself as the operational manager, Felix De Leon as the director of campus operations, Sally McGarrahan, the associate vice chancellor, the vice chancellor, Mark Fisher, and then the chancellor, Carolyn Christ. You would think that would be all that it needed, but there were many other challenges that we faced. One of them was procuring products. The products that Chip endorsed were sometimes not easily available on the West Coast. So we had to get a bunch from Colorado. And one of the challenges I didn't expect was like the heavy snowfall in Colorado in 2019 that delayed our shipment of humate almost 6 to 8 weeks. So there are things like that. There's also borrowing equipment from intercollegiate athletics and getting trained on it. Our landscape services group had not been trained on tractor aerators or stand-on aerator or slit seeders. So coordinating to all the equipment and getting the training was also a challenge there. one of the positives of the pandemics, whether you can believe it, if there was positives to the pandemic, was that there was hardly anybody on campus, so it was less daunting to cordon off these large glades and to keep people off of it. And then it was also easier to borrow the equipment because there weren't any games, so they weren't keeping their playing fields up to playability. So that what made it a little bit easier. There was also the logistics of the renovation and getting gardeners on board with the how, what, and why. This is a little more labor intensive and challenged to schedule the work, the aeration, and all this care, the renovation, while juggling the other priorities. And then there's also the major paradigm shift that Chip was talking about feeding the soil, not fertilizing the grass. So the test results that we took in 2018, soil test results in 2018 in July, and then again the ones in 2020 in December, showed that we were very successful. As soil becomes more fungal than bacterial, it is healthier. So the flagellates, which feed on bacteria, that population had skyrocketed in those 2.5 years. The active fungi had gone up 80%. The mycorrhizae fungi had gone up 70%. And the ciliates had plummeted. The absence of these anaerobic loving organisms show that the soil is no longer heavily compacted, which is the #1 problem with soil. So the surface of the lawns look healthy, but most importantly, the soil beneath is now much improved. We must trust the science. In closing, there are still continuing challenges. We need to coalesce the campus community in accepting and embracing the aesthetic of the lawn. We need to budget for higher costs to maintain the lawn and staff appropriately to go organic. And then we need to normalize the lawn renovation. What has been an inconvenience in prior years in not using the glades for recreation, lunch, or relaxation during renovation needs to be incorporated as the cost of going organic. So in closing, this collaboration with Chip Osborne and Beyond Pesticides has been very educational, informative, and successful for this 3-year pilot program. And thank you so much, Chip and Beyond Pesticide.
Well, thank you, Theron. Just a great job of taking something that came as an idea that you were exposed to and carrying it through to implementation. And, that's really what it's all about, making it happen. Next, we have Dennis Shanahan, City Councilor, and John Storr, Community Service Director from Dover, New Hampshire, who Dennis is the councilor, or City Councilor Shanahan is the decision maker, and the policy maker, and John works for the city, and his job is to sort of implement city council directives. So they have a story on how they got to where they are. So I'm going to put it out to the two of you, and you can bounce back and forth, or however you choose to use your time.
All right, thank you, Chip. So Dover is a small city in New Hampshire. For New Hampshire, being a small city means just over 30,000 people. So it's not the same kind of scope that a lot of people might think of when they think of a city. My involvement began just after I was elected to my first term. Went behind the ears, freshman councilor. Non-Toxic Dover, a local advocacy group, had been working for several years to try and eliminate the use of glyphosate on our curbside weed control program. And in addition, was concerned about other pesticides like 2,4-D. I met with them. We had a series of discussions, and I said, "All right, my first initiative. Here I go. I get to be a councilor now." So I introduced a resolution that did simply one thing with two materials. It intended to ban the use of glyphosate and 2,4-D. Now, my other councilors looked at this and they started to ask good questions. For example, so what are they going to replace glyphosate with? What are they going to use instead of 2,4-D? And basically the feedback was go back to the drawing board, think it through, come to the council with something that's got more meaning and it has a little bit more sustainability. So we pondered that, and what we ended up doing was to put together a resolution that did two things. One, it did completely ban the use of toxic pesticides. It required the use of the least toxic alternative for both pest and weed control. It also specified a 3-year transition period to eliminate the use of synthetic fertilizers. And I will say this applies to public areas, city-owned properties, because New Hampshire is a state rule state. We cannot preempt state law unless a state law says we can preempt a state law. So that does make it a little bit difficult. So currently, we are limited to only city-owned areas, public parks, school areas, public rights of way. Maybe that'll change in the future. I think I see a glimmer on the horizon at the state level that may become more possible. So we went off down this down a path to implement both phases of this. John can talk briefly about some of the solutions that came up for curbside weed control. I can say I think we've worked to a really good place. We have 3 forms of weed control that we use that we just I think are about to approve in responding to a bid. One of our bigger issues that we encountered was the 3-year transitional phase was not technically correct ultimately. What we ended up dealing with was the current synthetic fertilizer and turf management provider simply rolled in increasing percentages of what he felt to be organic fertilizer, mixing directly in with synthetic fertilizer. So our transition really over those 2 years was incomplete at best. Additionally, we struggled with having the technical knowledge to be able to issue requests for proposal, to get bids in, and then to help manage and oversee and implement the bids that were selected and the vendors that were selected. We had a lot of help getting out of that. Certainly Beyond Pesticides, Osborne Organics with Chip Osborne really provided a lot of input. And we were also motivated by a relationship with Stonyfield Yogurt. Their Stonyfield Organic program allowed us to kick everything off in a full organic plan with one of our baseball fields. Had a great field day with the community, really got a lot of positive attention for what we were doing. And ultimately, that really did set the framework for how to build a good process to get an organic program on city property kicked off. So really, getting expertise, whether it's in-house or through relationships, and then that really feeds into good bid proposals and being able to have a good transition period. In reality, even though it's been 5 years since this program started, our transition is really 2 years old this year. So John, do you want to add anything on curbside weed control or implementation?
Yeah, try to be really brief. Following up, I think it's important to Councilor Shanahan's point. Well, from direct community services and we don't have the expertise staff. It's like I joke, I'm a jack of all trades. I have to deal with snow plowing and traffic signals and sidewalks and bridges, and then learn about organic turf and curbside weed treatment. I'm sort of envious hearing what Theron has done out at UC Berkeley, having the in-house staff. We rely on outside consultants. And so we had, I think it's important to stress, we had 2 annual bids. We had a historic annual curbside weed treatment with glyphosate, which is really what the city wanted to get away. And now that has evolved where this year we're going to do sort of an integrated plan. We're going to try to seal cracks with a polymetric sand. And then we're going to use an ammoniated soap called Final Sand, which is an OMRI-approved organic herbicide for curbside use. And then on the organic turf, as Councilor Shanahan mentioned, we were bidding out those services. So it took a while. I remember trying to figure out how am I going to write an RFP for the appropriate products and the type of application services. And that was, it's like I was so far out of my element there. But thanks to folks like Beyond Pesticides being an advocate, I think every community needs an advocate to bring these issues to their elected bodies there's some questions that have been going on in the dialogue box. I think you really need to start with an advocacy. And that was where we did have a local advocate connected with Beyond Pesticides. You know, I thank Jay Feldman in his group, and then we got connected with Chip Osborne, and then through Stonyfield Foods, we were able to get a pilot program going where we brought Pam Newcombe in, and Pam was able to take some of Chip Osborne's recommendations, and I think Chip came up with a great strategy. But for us to migrate over, we had to look at ways for cost effectiveness on how we could make the applications, because we have to go out for bid on everything and try to get the applications down. I think Chip had some recommendations for liquid applications versus powdered or solid, and how we could mix and match a little bit. So I think our learning curve continues to advance, and I think I'll stop there. Transition over to Pam, where Pam Newcombe has actually come in as sort of a product supplier and an applicator to work with us here in Dover, New Hampshire.
Perfect. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, John. Perfect segue. That made my job very easy right there. Pam Newcombe, Pam, I'm going to ask you to just give a short, just to tell us a little bit about who you are, your company, and what the focus of your company is. And then I've got 2 or 3 questions that we'll just go back and forth with for a few minutes.
Sure. So I am Pam Newcombe. I'm the CEO of PJC Organic. We're located in Rowley, Massachusetts, and we've been in business since 2002. Started as a full-service landscape company specializing in organic fertilization services. Then halfway through, we went into manufacturing. We actually bought the manufacturing rights to Renaissance all natural organic fertilizers. Some that have been around a long time might remember them. Have since renamed the product line PJC Pro Healthy Turf Products. And we work with landscapers, schools, and municipalities in the Northeast and Midwest, and we provide organic turf care products and services. So it could look a little different depending on the setup. In some situations, we're strictly a product supplier for cities and schools that do their own labor and applications. For some, we help with soil testing and make program suggestions. And then in the case of the city of Dover, we are actually the service provider and responsible for the product applications.
Perfect. So, Pam and her company is in a unique position in that they develop, right? Research and development, develop organic fertilizer materials and products branded under their own brand, and then have a service division to be able to, meet that. So that's a unique piece. Pam, let's talk a little bit about, I've always said that in your end of things, you're the most important piece when once a decision has been made to go organic. And I know myself working on a national level, the hardest thing I have to find, and you and I have talked about this, is the source of organic fertilizer. Equally hard is to try to find somebody that is skilled in how to implement a systems-based organic program. So from your perspective, knowing that it's your end of it that really makes it all work, how do you see the movement of organic fertilizers into the marketplace, to be able to fit that niche?
Well, I see a common theme here. I wasn't sure what others were going to talk about, but for us as a product supplier, I'm going to go back to the advocacy work that people in the community are doing. What we like to see is where are people interested in making the change? Because educating the customer is one of the biggest challenges that as a product company, we don't have time to do. So getting people to think differently, and others have said it, it's not about swapping a bag of synthetic fertilizer for a bag of organic fertilizer. That's not going to work. So for us, we work in a consultative sale mode. So the advocacy work that precedes us is really important. And we look for that as where should we go next?
That's interesting that you took it there, because that was actually my next question is, the education of potential clients. to the point that in some cases you have to tell them what an organic fertilizer is.
Mhm.
How is it different from synthetic? How does it work differently? Yes, there's a microbial fraction involved. All of those things. The expectation, it's not going to work as fast as the synthetic counterpart. I'm sure that's something that you have to deal with on a regular basis. And I know that you do take some time to educate folks, but being a business person, that's not the focus of your business. So it's great to hear that you rely on advocacy preceding you.
Yeah, actually, it works really well when Stonyfield has gone in, or there's been some education that has already gone on, because we're able to pick it up from there and reinforce what they know and build on it. So it really is key.
And I will say that I'm spoiled here in the Northeast when I work, because I just tell people to, I'm not a salesman for Pam, but there just aren't a lot of good organic fertilizer companies that sell. And, organic fertilizer, and Pam, you can touch on this a little bit, because your product line is based on a combination of essential raw materials that feeds the soil.
Mm-hmm.
There's no fancy bells and whistles. There's no great crazy names. There's not this big laundry list of everything under the sun in there. But everything that's in those bags goes to one central purpose. Maybe just take a minute and expand on yours and, the company's thoughts on putting it together with raw materials doing just as good as all the fancy things that are out there.
Yeah, we really look at, for us, we call it the healthy turf circle, soil chemistry, soil biology, soil structure, and cultural practices. So we're trying to figure out what are we trying to do? Are we trying to feed the bacteria component in the soil? Then we want to come in with some soy-based products. Feather meal tends to be more fungal food. So it gets expensive the more you put in the bag. And in our opinion, that you want to get those big building blocks in place first, using those raw materials. We try to minimize transportation miles to keep those costs down. But we really think about what is it you're trying to do with the different products you're putting into place. And that for us, we find it's better to choose different products to fit different needs than thinking you're going to have one product that can fit all of the needs.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's the way that the way that I look at it. And interestingly enough, working, Jay and I work all over the country, including Hawaii, and we're actually talking to Pam right now about getting some of her product shipped to Maui, to Kauai, to facilitate projects out there, because we just can't find what we need. So interesting story there. So why don't we stop there? I still have more, but we'll take it a different direction. Let's see if we have any questions in the chat here. Here's one that may be Dennis, or this may be up your alley, and maybe you could guide on some thoughts, and even John on this. The question is, I'm curious as to whether or not I should start working at the city. This is from Kara. I'm curious as to whether or not I should start working at the city or city council level when working to transition to organic land management, especially in our parks. So I guess an interested person in a community is looking to find out the best place to start.
Well, I would say that you do need to look at, your local political culture. I mean, that's always a piece of it. But typically, that's the policymakers are a really good place to start, to find who's the person who's got the interest, and certainly the ability to grasp the larger picture. A lesson that we have from Dover is that, we're in the watershed for, I believe, the largest estuary in the Northeast, the Great Bay. The Great Bay is compromised. It's overly rich in nitrogen. It's had eelgrass die off. It's a visible thing to point at and say, we can enact policies that are going to make a difference on that body of water. So if you have that kind of a lesson that you can bring to your policymakers, I think that will really go far. But you also need a couple other things. One, you need community support, and as Chip mentioned with Diana Carpinone, you need persistence. You've got to keep the message going out there so that it isn't one of those 500 emails that a counselor might get. It's the one that stands out and says, this is where I can step in and make a difference, and being able to point at something and say, that's changed because of what we're doing here.
Hey, Chip, if I,
Yeah, John.
sorry,
Yes.
Chip, I was just going to follow up to echo some of Councilor Shanahan's position. As an elected official, he was able to bring that forward. But I think it was the persistence of an advocate like Diana Carpinone and, getting involved with Beyond Pesticides. But I remember speaking to Diana, I said, it takes a while for change to happen at the municipal level. We might have to go, through a budget cycle before we can make changes and things of that nature. But it was also extremely helpful to get the grant from Stonyfield Foods to work with you, Chip, on doing a program for Woodman Park. And then we were fortunate to connect with Pam, and we were able to see how Pam was able to do that Woodman Park field. And we had the demonstration with Stonyfield Foods, so counselors and people from the community could come out. So over a period of time, we were able to prove that, hey, this does work. And now we've expanded the program that Chip, you and Pam put together for our one ball field. And in Dover, we're doing 24 acres, but it's a mix. We've got our library and city hall. We've got a couple of parks and a couple of ball fields. So it's really a diverse use. But I think it was the advocacy, bringing it forward, being able to do a pilot. And it really, for us, it took some time. I think Councilor Shanahan mentioned, don't try to, start from scratch and just do a product swap. But where, what was tough for us in the Northeast, where we didn't have the staff on board, we had to hire this out. So I would strongly suggest, if you're starting from scratch in a municipal entity or somebody trying to procure services, don't go through a public low bid. Try to do a request for qualifications and find a consultant or a vendor or an applicator that has a successful track record of organic programs and that you can call some references. I think that would be the great way to start, because we tried to do a low bid product swap and that was a fiasco.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jay and I have long said that what organic land management is simply swapping out product, trying to find the organic alternative for synthetic fertilizers, the organic insecticide, and so forth, and learning to focus on systems and culture. Barbara, I don't know if my chat is working. Do you see any questions that I'm not seeing here on the chat?
Yeah, so we have one just about advocacy and if Beyond Pesticides has staff that are available to review advocacy plans. And I can go ahead and answer that and say,
perfect.
Drew Tower is our community resource and policy manager, and he's helped a lot of cities go through this process, and it's definitely worth reaching out to him or just the info box generally, and that's info at beyondpesticides.org. And then the next question is sort of a technical one that it says, are you familiar with microseed that uses tall fescue seeds and microclover, or Jonathan Green Ultra tall fescues without the microclover?
I guess I could answer that. Yep, familiar with both of those. The fescue grasses are the newer turf type tall fescue grasses are probably the most adaptive to a wide range of environmental conditions. They are being all kinds of sports turf, right down to public parks and lower maintenance areas. Micro clover can be incorporated as something that fixes atmospheric nitrogen. So it's a clover, but it's not as prominent as Dutch white clover. but it fixes the same amount of nitrogen. So that combination, tall fescue, turf type tall fescue, not the old tall fescue, but turf type tall fescue on its own, or with a little bit of other cool season grasses, or the fescue with clover, both would be considered the most sustainable grass mixes. In other words, those that require the least amount of cultural intensity. So that's that. If you don't have anything else, I've got a couple here now. Mary, you mentioned a question here when you mentioned about education and, you know, working to educate people. I've got somebody here that's asked, do you have any specific focus on education, or how, say the first step, if we're looking to have educational outreach to the average citizen, in your mind, what would be that logical first step that someone would take?
I don't even know if there's a logical first step. It probably depends on your population, and it depends how active of a landscaping community there is. For instance, around where I am, there's different groups that, you know, get together and talk about these things, and they're a good start, you know, when it comes to even things like our master gardeners and such who answer the phone lines at the ag extension, and they get questions about lawn pests and weeds and things of that nature. So I think any group / partner that can help amplify your message is going to be really helpful. One of the biggest challenges, particularly with lawns, is that they are not considered of an ecological benefit, and they are not usually focused on with environmental programming when it comes to resources, especially in local government funneling resources. But I always give the example that here in Montgomery County, about 13% of our land is covered in impervious surface, and 26% of our land is covered in turf grass. We have fees that go towards stormwater management and big focus on impervious surfaces, and there's no resources to educate about lawns, for example, and how to make them an actual asset to our environment versus a negative suck on our environment. So for us, you know, even with being a relatively wealthy county, we struggle budget-wise with getting the word out on this. But having things like websites and social media, those can go a really long way towards starting to get people to even think about this, because what we're facing with all of these challenges is, you know, anytime we can put something on social media and then the ad that's going to come up is your Mosquito Joe and all those people, like they're funneling money like crazy because they're for profits. And so they get the ads out there on social media, they get all of that attention, and we're up against these companies that are telling us that we're bad people if our lawn doesn't look like a golf course in, you know, the commercials for buy this 4-step program and so on and so forth. So finding any means to get into the same space that they're also advertising in is going to help, because that's. Oh, you're muted, Chip.
And I had some. That's great information. I have a question for Theron and Juan, and then one for Pam. Theron and or Juan, as you were working and beginning this process, you know, working with me, you know, you went to Susan Junefish's, you know, talk. You met Jay, Mackenzie Feldman, Bridget, Herbicide Free Campus. How did you go and sort of promote or explain what you were doing when people, I imagine that was a part of the communication that you had to do. So you had like a tough job because you were at a responsibility to the university, you were trying something new, and then you had to communicate what you were doing in the process. Any tips you could give on how someone could communicate what they were doing in a transition and why?
Well, yeah, I have a good partner like Drew Toher over at Beyond Pesticides. Also have the energy and the drive of Bridget Gustafson and Mackenzie Feldman, because those, like you said, they gave me guidance. They were a driving force. The students here at UC Berkeley, like most students throughout the United States, have so much energy and drive, and they see a better way for the future, I think. So it was more difficult for me to change the the idea of how the gardeners were treating the land and stuff, because I was getting some pushback because the weeds were growing, in the landscapes and stuff, because we've been glyphosate free since 2019, June of 2019. So we're still trying to figure out ways to deal with that. But with the students and herbicide free Cal, which what it was originally, now it's called herbicide free campus, and it's throughout the United States. They're getting out the word, and they have a great network on how to spread the information and stuff. So it's been kind of organically, pun intended, I guess, grown, and it's kind of grown like a weed. I mean, everybody's interested in it, and to get that information out is important. And we're just trying to use our website and then share the website from Herbicide Free Cal and then from Beyond Pesticides. So there's a lot of information out there. It's just still such a daunting task for the people that I supervise, Juan included, is that they work so extremely hard every day, and yet the weeds are, proliferating, procreating quicker than we can pull them, sheet mulch them, or exterminate them, in an organic manner. But the information's out there. And so, you just need to tap into the right group. Ours was the energy of the students on campus and Beyond Pesticides.
Great, thank you. Pam, as a major product supplier, with certainly a presence within the industry, have you noticed an increase in demand, for, your variety of products, not just fertilizers, but those carbon-based materials that, do what we were talking, feed, things that feed the soil, things that stimulate microbes. How now that you have, quite a number of years under your belt, a little bit of perspective on where you see us now, or where you see yourself now in the demand and the supply side of the industry, and what your expectations for growth are.
Yeah, well, this year has been particularly exciting. I don't know if it's because coming off of all of the COVID, people are more health conscious, but we work a lot with landscapers, and we have had a season where they are calling and saying, I'm experiencing 30% growth. Most of those landscapers have been doing organic land management now for a number of years. So they have lawns that are demonstrating the success, which has been it's just been crazy. And we have a product called Charge S3 that we developed a couple years ago, and that's a carbon-based product, and that is almost outpacing our fertilizer. So that's really exciting because there's a definite shift. They're realizing it's not just about fertilizer; it's about those other components in the soil. And we also are experiencing now, municipalities calling us. We're going out this Thursday to talk to a municipality that wants to trial 2 fields. So the word is getting out there that it can be done. People are starting to hear success. And like I said, just this year, there's a real shift. Even in our own service division, the inbound calls this year has been just crazy. So I'm excited about that, and I do look at it as the efforts that have been going on are finally tipping the other side. So I see it continue to grow. The other thing that we're seeing when we work with municipalities, we say that 3 to 5 years, your inputs are going to start to go down, and we've been working with municipalities and schools long enough that we have proven that true. So in our business, we say it's a losing business model because now there's schools and municipalities we work with that we actually sell less product to. We're kind of like, didn't think that one through, but I think it's exciting.
The good news is that for every client you're able to reduce and show the cost benefit, you hopefully pick up 2 or 3 new ones that offset that in that sort of model. The one point I just wanted to quickly make is that I think part of the message too, in everything, everybody that's talked about this, and Theron talking about is biology improving and the bad guys going way down because now there's enough oxygen and the good guys are surviving and all of that. But it really is about, just like Jeff Moyer said, is feeding the soil, preserving the soil, restoring the soil to good health. And that product that Pam referenced, it's only 3% nitrogen. It's a soil builder. It's got all kinds of things in there, but the nitrogen is a little bit of it. And that's exactly the opposite of what has been promoted in the industry for all the years, is just fill a bag with nitrogen and go about. My next question for that came in, Pam, somebody wanted to know about what kind of clients, and you just touched on that. But the diversity of clients, and is it, you're having a little bit of, it seems like from your last answer, you expanded on a little bit, from everywhere, from interest in landscape contractors, school districts, municipalities, and all that. So is that accurate that you're seeing it across the board?
Yeah, we are. And then we run the residential service division, and we're seeing it on that side too. So it is really across the board. And just to add one other thing, thinking of that soil biology component, a concern we're often asked is, what are you going to do about grubs? That was a big concern at Dover. And it hasn't been a problem because the good biology is keeping the bad biology in check. So that was pretty exciting.
And that's exactly what happens, when that beetle lays her eggs, they're microscopic. And if you get an aggressive biomass with everybody up and down the food chain there, a lot of those are gobbled up before they ever get to be an issue. John, question for you. That is there. You were in the tasked with the difficult job of coming up with the RFP. To do this. Somebody wanted to know how much different is the RFP for chemical management and organic management, because I'm guessing that you had to put a strong focus on the cultural practices, things like aeration and things like that in an RFP. But just quickly, a little bit of the challenge that you went through to come up with that, because I'm sure that was a difficult thing.
Yeah, I think I have post-traumatic stress reliving that episode, but I have to stress, I'm a civil engineer. I do water, sewer, highway. I had to learn about organic turf from scratch, and my analogy was trying to look at that. We're a municipality. Every taxpayer dollars, we have a procurement policy to make sure we're being wise with the expenditure of that taxpayer dollars. So we do go out and solicit for bids. I thought it was going to be as simple as specifying for a Ford truck, we just swap to a Chevy truck going from synthetic to organic. And I was so far in over my head. It's like, Chip, you had to come to our rescue and provide some guidance. And I was not qualified to write that on my own, because I was literally just doing a product swap. And I am not a horticulturist. I'm not a landscape professional. I said, I'm just the guy trying to keep the water and sewer going, and on the side, I'm trying to do the organic turf piece. But that's where you need to bring on board some level of expertise that can guide you. Whether you can bring somebody, Chip, like yourself, that if you can work with an entity to provide guidance, or if you have to go through a selection process, that you maybe go through a statement of qualifications and try to find somebody that has a successful history with providing the products and providing the application, because that was a tough process. I think, part of Dover's story is if we had to go back and do it over again, we learned from our mistakes by trying to do a product swap. I remember, I'm looking at Pam Newcombe. I remember her coming to the pre-bid and her just shaking her head like, boy, they don't even know what they're in for here. But through a period of a year or two, we've worked through the trials and tribulations. We've advanced our knowledge. And I'm happy to say it was quite a learning process, and we're continuing to learn. But I feel like we're in a much better place now. I think through Councilor Shanahan's leadership and initiative, he brought the resolution forward. It was based on advocacy, and we've carried that over. Like I said, we've gotten away from glyphosate on our curbside program, and we were going all organic on our turf. So it was a rough process. And I said, you
I just
need
have
somebody.
to jump in real quick. We've got about 4 minutes left, and it's going to be a sharp cutoff. Sorry.
Yeah. If you're going out to bid, make sure you get an expert on board to help you specify the program. And it really, you can't ask for an apples to apples comparison. You really need to get in. I think what Pam did was start off with a program based on pre-testing, doing soil tests and tailoring the program to that. So it was a tough process.
Thank you. And it is a process when you're going out, and my work and Pam's, a lot of times we're working with clients that do things in-house and then outsourced. And you're absolutely right. It's more difficult when we outsource. Maybe I will just take a minute or two, unless if another question comes in, I'll stop, but just to sort of tie this all together. You've heard in the messages here that the advocacy community is important, and the advocacy community can inspire, someone like Councilman Shanahan to look at this and understand there's a constituent there for, Theron, who was invited by as much as Diana is in her non-toxic communities and a force there in Dover and nationally. This Susan Junfish that Theron referred to is a force in the Pacific Northwest, an amazing woman. And she is the one that put this together. She brought 120 people together in a room on my first trip out there with her. And then we followed it up with the one that Theron attended. And it was, that. So the advocacy is at that. But then, somebody like Theron that it resonated with Councilman Shanahan, it resonated with, and then decided, to take the initiative upon himself to introduce it through his political process. And then, you've just heard the story on where both of them ended up as success stories. Not that everything's perfect with the grass every day and every time, but probably wasn't with chemicals either. But the reality is that it is a process, and if there is commitment, that there are issues that can be worked through to achieve over time. And I stress over time, this is not a quick fix, instant gratification strategy or program, but this is a program that involves education, reorientation of thought process, attention to what's under your feet as opposed to what you're looking at. So underneath, one of my greatest compliments was, now I understand what's going on under my feet after I trained a city employee, because they realized that the soil and a regenerative nature to soil, trying to build it and leave it in a better place than we found it. That's what Pam's product does. That's what Theron did. That's the RFP that was responded in Dover, and it's all about trying to build healthy soils. I'm guessing now that we're coming very close to the hard stop. Am I right there? I'm trying to watch my little clock here.